Well, good afternoon. I am just opening up the session so that we can allow all of our attendees to come out of the waiting room and into the live session. So we'll just give that a few moments for people to be able to arrive. Right. Okay. I can see people coming out of the waiting room into the live session. So let's get cracking. So hello, welcome this afternoon to our webinar from EcoProd in partnership with our good friends at the Water Retail Company. Today we're talking about how an effective water management strategy can save your business money and reduce your environmental impact. So before I get into the kind of heart of the presentation, Jacob, could you just move the slides on for me, please? A few kind of housekeeping points. Jacob, could you move the next slide?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Oh, is it delayed? Oh, sorry.
We've just gone forward on. That's all right. A few housekeeping points. We are recording the session today so that once we're done here, we can get you a link to watch the session back. You'll also get an opportunity to download the slides there as well. So any links and things like that that we're showing today will all be available to you afterwards. You'll notice as you join that your lines are all muted. So whilst you can hear us, we can't hear you, but there is a Q&A function and a chat function at the bottom of your Zoom control panel. So if you have questions or things you would like, comments you would like to make and so on, please use that as we go through the session. We do allow some time at the end of the agenda so that I can ask some of those questions live and we can have a bit of a discussion with our presenters today. So our agenda, next slide, please, Jacob. A few introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about who we are, who EcoProd are, and who the Water Retail Company are. And then we're going to get into, Jacob's going to discuss kind of what is a water management strategy, go through some of the benefits, discuss the different elements of what makes up a water management strategy, and then importantly, how to develop and implement that. And as I said, we'll finish off at the end with some open questions. So we've got three of us on the line today. Myself, I'm Rachel. I'm Business Development Manager here at EcoProd. I've got two colleagues. I've got Marcus Rose, who's the MD at EcoProd, and Jacob, as I mentioned, from the Water Retail Company. So Marcus, if I give it to you at this point.
Thank you, Rachel, and afternoon to everyone in the audience who's joined us today. Before I introduce Professor Jacob Tompkins, I'd just like to give you and everyone on this call a bit of background about EcoProd. So the beginnings of EcoProd evolved during 2006, where I could see a need for the issues around water and energy saving within commercial washrooms to be addressed. I don't know if anyone remembers, but back then we'd come through 3 consecutive dry winters, a spring drought, and so I could see that this trend was not going to go away from us. And so the concept of ecological and economical products came alive. Just to explain to everyone in the audience, I'm a mechanical engineer with circa 30 years experience in the industry. At EcoProd, the whole sales team, we take a consultative approach to sales, whereby we engage with our clients and prospects to fully understand their needs and wants. We then back this up with technical knowledge and support to deliver best practice, mainly solutions within the washroom environment, but you'll hear more as we go through this presentation. Water saving is our passion, where we aim to achieve a return on investment timeline through the projected savings we think we can achieve. Along with that is coupled the benefit of reduction in reactive maintenance through the introduction of high quality products that have design features that reduce maintenance. We work very closely with the high quality product brands that we represent here in the UK. So the purpose of this webinar is to convey that we need to look seriously at all aspects of our water management policies. For those in facility management, we have a duty of care to advise best practice And along with that, we need to also understand responsibilities upon us for water management, quality and control. So this is exactly why I've enjoyed working with Jacob now for in excess of 10 years. I've always appreciated his in-depth knowledge of the water industry and expert advice, and we often have numerous discussions around improvements in product design and water management within washrooms. But you're now going to hear more in terms of detail around a water management plan and how the water retail company can help any organisation. So I'd now like to introduce Jacob Tompkins.
Thank you, Marcus. Okay, water retail company. As you all probably know, the water sector has been divided in two. So there is a wholesale element, and there are now retailers, a bit like the way you can choose your electricity provider at home. Businesses can now choose their water company. And we are one of those. We're mainly dealing with large, complicated sites, but we'll certainly have a look at anyone's water supply and advise them. But the main thing we're interested in is proper water management and water efficiency. The best way to save money on your water bill is not just to get the cheapest price, it's to manage water efficiently. And that's why we love working with EcoProd. Marcus and his team have untold expertise in this area and have been advising businesses as of we, so we're delighted to be working with them. We work with clients all the time on developing efficiency, developing water management plans, looking at how they can reduce their water usage, reduce their effluent, and reduce their surface water drainage. Water is generally seen as being quite cheap, but it is absolutely essential to your business. And I would say that every single company has to have a water management plan, even if it's just a meeting in the boardroom saying we need a water management plan, and then it's just a 2-minute thing scribbled on the back of an envelope. You've got to have thought about it. You've got to have a plan. So having said that, what is a water management strategy? Well, it's fairly a strategy for the management of water. Sounds fairly basic, but it is surprising how few businesses, and quite often very large businesses, do not think about this. Businesses often forget about water. They don't have the tools to manage it, and they don't think strategically about it. And you may say, why is that important? But if you think about what would your business do if your water got shut off for a day? Most businesses would have to close. What would it do to your supply chain? What would happen if your supply chain had problems with their water and couldn't supply you? What would happen if your customers had problems with their water? It is essential to every business. And quite often people think about energy management plans, energy backup generators, all that sort of stuff, but they don't think about water. So what a water management strategy is, it's a comprehensive overview of everything to do with water. And that ranges from the detailed stuff that Marcus does around hygiene and washrooms, right through to the stuff about what would you do if there was a drought and there were suddenly interruptions in supply or low pressure from your wholesaler. So let's start to look in more detail. What are the benefits of a water management strategy? Well, I think the first bit is complying with regulations, and there are a lot more regulations around water than you think. Water is essential for all businesses, but it can also poison people. And I think, Marcus, if you want to talk a little bit about the duty around washrooms, around water safety within the business, then I can talk about the wider regulation part as well. Marcus, shall I bring you in here?
Yeah, sure, Jacob. Yeah, happy to step in and add a bit about that. Yes, I think, as I mentioned in my opening piece about who we are at EcoProd, one of the things that we try to sort of stress and get across to especially facilities management is they do have a duty of care to advise best practice. As you say, there are lots of regulations, not least around water hygiene. Now, that is a subject in its own right, and we could run a webinar around water hygiene in its own right. But just to touch on the fact that persons that are responsible for washrooms, facilities managers, estates directors, etc., they need to have gone through the process of understanding what the deliverables are in those areas, and also to understand what is required in terms of making sure that the washrooms that their staff, visitors, customers are using are compliant, and that is all backed up into the message around regulation. Does that help?
I think we might have lost Jacob's screen there. Jacob, are you still on the line with us?
Hi. Sorry,
Oh,
I'm having. Give me 1 second. I think I'm having a slight difficulty here.
do you want me to put the slides up, Jacob?
Hello.
Jacob,
Hi.
do you want me to... Hi, Jacob, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you see my screen now again?
No, not yet. Do you want me to put the
No.
slides up myself?
Yes, sorry. It's asking me to re-register for the webinar.
No, don't worry about that. Listen, I'll share my screen, Jacob, and you,
Yes, please.
and then you just talk.
Sorry, my skills are in water, not necessarily in IT, as you can see. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Right.
So here we are.
Yeah. Okay. So, Marcus, were you? I got cut off. Had you covered regulations?
Yeah, I've just covered regulations, Jake, in terms of what the deliverable will be for compliance within the washroom and how that's managed or needs to be managed by FM and estates directors within any organisation. They need to have gone through the process, at least to have it documented.
Yes. Okay. So regulatory requirements are key. The next bit is reducing costs. So water costs money. Perhaps not as much as your electricity or your IT, where clearly I should be investing a bit, but water and sewerage have costs associated with them, as does surface water drainage. So anyone sort of north of Birmingham, the way that water surface drainage is charged for is slightly different, and it can run into tens of thousands. But the other things are that there's a lot of hidden cost in water. So water's very, very heavy. It's also extremely difficult to heat. So if you've got any processes that involve pumping of water or heating or cooling of water, up to a third of your electricity costs can be because of water. And that then leads us on to the next bit, that it's a good way to reduce carbon. So if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, looking at your water use and reducing that is a really efficient way, much more efficient than space heating or insulation. Water is a very quick way to reduce CO2 equivalent. Benefiting the environment, obviously the carbon side has a benefit to the environment, but also if you have to take less water out of the natural environment, that's a positive thing. And if you're not putting back as much sewage or as much contaminated water into the environment, that's positive as well. There are also benefits to your staff and to your customers, both in terms of feeling good, but also in terms of things like productivity. Quite often when you look at your water management strategy, it gives your staff opportunities to talk about where other efficiencies can be made. And obviously customers are now looking increasingly at the environmental credentials of the companies they work with. And then, and I'll come back to Marcus on this, it guides decision making. So if you're about to put in a new boiler, or you're about to make decisions over your cooling towers, or you're going to refurbish your bathroom, your washrooms, How do you know you're making the right choices? How do you know that the amount you're spending is right? How do you know that the return on investment will be correct? Unless you're looking at that within the context of a formal water management strategy. And things like water reuse or rainwater harvesting, you can't possibly make those decisions unless you're looking at them within an overall context of a water management strategy. Marcus, do you want to say a bit about that, about choice around washrooms?
I'm actually going to give the audience an example here. We're currently working and advising with a sports facility who they've looked at some of the water efficient products for their washroom from our product offering, and I've been doing a piece of work for them on that. But at certain peak times, they've been running out of hot water and they've been running out of cold water. Now, their choice, or the avenue they were going down initially, was to increase their cold water capacity and increase their hot water capacity. And so I got involved and I said, no, wrong approach here. What you need to do is you need to make every connected outlet within the facility as efficient as possible. You might find, having gone through that process, that, and I think this is going to be the case, they won't have to increase their hot water capacity. They won't have to increase their cold water capacity, but they'll just need to make sure that equipment is on high recovery. So what was initially going to be a huge outlay of CapEx cost for plant now is smaller in terms of the input on that value, but they're going to put that CapEx cost into far more efficient equipment throughout the sports facility. Does that help give a sort of a live case study as to that process that guides decision making?
I think as well, the sorts of stuff that Marcus is mentioning there is going to be extremely pertinent this year, because it's unlikely that people are going to be taking foreign holidays. So we're going to be seeing large movements of people around the UK, which means particularly in holiday destinations, you're going to see stresses on water networks, which means that you're going to see low pressure. You're going to potentially see interruptions in supply. And those businesses who understand their water use and have already made it efficient will be more resilient against that. It's fairly similar to financial budgeting. You wouldn't make a decision to invest thousands of pounds in one certain area of a business without knowing the overall financial picture. Yet people do it for water without knowing the overall picture. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'm just going to tell you how to do a very basic water management strategy. Before you call in any fancy consultants, although I work as a consultant, so I'm not going to badmouth them too much, but before you bring in people like me and Marcus, do the basic work yourself. And this is the simple, what we call a bucket model. So the first question is, where does your water come from in your business? I mean, fairly obvious, probably comes out the tap, but it might also come from rainwater. You might have some water butts, you might have some rainwater storage. It might be that the landscaping around your office is just rain fed. So that's still water coming into your business, but it's what we call blue water. So that's rainwater. There might be water from the tap. There might be water from a borehole. So think about the different sources of water, or you may reuse it. Quite often, some businesses where they've got cleaning in place on an assembly line will recycle that water. So then the next question is, what do you use water for? And try and be comprehensive in that. So when I've talked about, landscaping, so how do you water the lawns? Who washes your windows? What water is used in processes? Is it just the washrooms you use? So every business uses water. It might just be for making a cup of tea and flushing the toilet, but there are lots more uses than you probably think. So what you need to do is actually sit down and list all of those uses. And then where does it go? Again, you might think it flushes down the toilet or goes down the drain, but it might be lost through evaporation. It might actually go into a process. If you're a bakery, for instance, it could go into the bread. So, and there, once you know those things, the way your water bill is broken down means that if the water coming into your premises from the tap is not going back down the sewer, you can get an allowance. And we quite often do these for businesses, and we can save them tens of thousands of pounds just by filling in a simple form that says, actually, the water isn't going back down the sewer, it's going into the product, or it's being lost through evapotranspiration. And then the question is, how much does each of these stages cost? So how much are you paying for the water coming into your business? When you use the water, are you making ice, for instance? Because there's a large electricity cost associated with that. And then where does it go? Are you paying for sewerage? Are you paying for trade effluent, which is where if you're a metal processing plant or something, you have quite concentrated effluent, or a food plant. And also, again, this varies from water company to water company. Are you paying highways drainage? Are you paying surface water drainage? So pull together all of your bills that you have and try and then reconcile those against those three first questions. And you will suddenly say, hang on a minute, why am I paying surface water drainage for a site that is 200 square meters when actually we've downsized and the site is only 100 square meters? This sort of question. Or you can look on Google Maps and you can check whether the surface water drainage area is correct. So there are quite a few basic things you can do. So the first thing is sit down, gather these bits of information, gather together all of your water bills, any charges you have for things like boreholes, and also if you have car washing on your premises, or if you have windows washed, think about where the water comes. Does the window cleaner bring the water themselves? Does that water go down your drain? Are they filling their tanks from your taps? Just ask these basic questions about water, and then it will enable you to be more resilient, because you'll know whether you've got alternative supplies. You'll know where the areas of weakness or the areas of high use are. So this is the basic element of a water management strategy. Next slide.
I came across a bit of a bizarre one on that recently, Jacob, just to put it in. I came across quite a large internal planting feature in a corporate office location, which was using excessive amounts of tap water to have it maintained. So you can imagine that volume of water they're actually paying return to sewer charges on. Yeah. So they've now isolated the water supply to that planting and changed the whole planting for a living wall feature, providing exactly the same ambience. So that's a classic case of water being used in a situation where it didn't need to be.
And you wouldn't realize that unless you actually sat down and went through this process.
Exactly. It wasn't until I went there and uncovered it that they suddenly thought, oh yeah, hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, that's why it's good to get experts like Marcus in. But as I say, you can do this bit first and then bring the experts in to give the real added value. Just another illustration around that on a much larger scale. There is a university and a hospital in the north of England that share the same site. And it turned out that since the hospital was built in 18, whatever it was, they had never paid a water bill. And the university had been paying for the hospital since it was founded. So that's several £million. But again, the problem was that the accountants just paid the bills because it was the water bill. No one ever said, what's this for? Where is it used? Hang on a minute, we're paying for someone else's water. So you'll quite often find that, or you might even find that, and this is quite common in sort of high street premises, that the meters are switched the wrong way around. So if you've got 2 meters in a pit serving 2 businesses next to each other, quite often the piping or the meters are serving the wrong one. So you'll have your meter readings and actually they'll be doing the reading for the barbers next door rather than your newsagents. And that can make a big difference. But you don't spot any of this until you start to do a water management plan. So, sorry. So how can you improve on what you've already got? These are the sorts of questions that will help you develop your water management plan. So once you know where your water's coming from, what it's being used for and where it's going, as Marcus said, that planting example is perfect. How can you improve on what you've already got? are the changes that you can make? Are there simple areas like using roof water for external irrigation? How can you monitor and maintain your water management strategy once it's in place? So if you develop a water management strategy, that's fine, but it can't be a static document. You need to constantly update that. You need to constantly check the state of the art in terms of equipment. You also need to look at, have you had changes in the processes within your plant? Have you had changes in the number of staff? Has the size of your premises changed? Have you looked at changing your water retailer? You could save money through that. This isn't an advert, but it's something you should certainly look at. And have things like pressure changed? Have there been other developments in the area that mean that you're now on a supply that's potentially got a lower pressure? And then the question is, how do you do this? How do you monitor and maintain? The first thing I would do is to find out a responsible individual. So who's in charge of water? And I think this is a key question for most businesses. Who's responsible for water? And it could be that the person responsible then just says, this is too complicated, we're going to outsource it. But at least they are the single point of contact. And that person could be senior board member. It could be one of the staff who uses the most water. It could be someone in facilities management, or it could be someone who's just particularly enthusiastic around water. Marcus, do you want to contribute to how you can maintain the plan and how you can find out who it is that's responsible?
Yeah, well, I think you've really touched on it in putting across, Jacob. Somebody needs to take responsibility for it. It's their remit within the organisation, and they may well have to call on a number of components to be able to bring together all the pieces of the jigsaw to make sure that water management strategy, the whole planning process, is formulated into a document where it can be kept alive and be maintained efficiently without undue work going forward. So you might have to go to procurement for some water bills and some detail around maybe equipment installed. You might have to go to facilities management to get some other pieces of the whole plan together. But somebody needs to take ownership of being the water management safe strategy guru. And I think you'll find that when I've witnessed this happening within organizations, you generally find the other pieces that come together to make that one whole component. When they see somebody's actually passionate and wants to be responsible for the water use and everything within that organization, you generally find the rest of the personnel that need to be involved do get involved because they can see the benefit. Because ultimately, this is savings that's going to go to the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, I think Marcus is absolutely right there. The savings are substantial once you start to look at this. And then the next question, how do you keep it live and how do you maintain momentum? I think once businesses start to see that they can save money or they can improve service, or that, for instance, their washrooms are a lot better than they were, or that their processes for manufacture become a lot more efficient, the water agenda will drive itself. The most important thing is getting it recognized in the first place. And I think it's getting it recognized, it's allocating a champion, and then it's going through those simple things that we talked about. And then if you want to bring someone in externally, that's fine. But they will then be building on what you've got, and you'll be then using them for their detailed expertise rather than the basic stuff of just gathering your bills together. So how do we do this? So as we said, who's responsible for water in your business? And quite often it is nobody or it's lots of people. And quite often the people who are responsible for paying the water bill don't have very much to do with the use of water at all. So we've seen examples where, as I've said, accounts departments have been paying for water abstraction licenses on boreholes that no longer exist, or boreholes that are never used. And these are quite substantial sums, but you can't expect accountants to know how water's being used in the business. They just know they have to pay the water bill or they get cut off. So that's the first bit. And then, yes, allocate a champion. And that could be anyone in the business. And then gather the data. So in terms of data, what we're talking about is the basic stuff we talked about first of all, just drawing a schematic of where water comes from, how it's used and where it goes. But then also gathering data on your water bills, your consumption, and possible areas of import or export of water. And then we move on to completing a water audit. So that's almost like the water accounts for your business. And we've developed one of these with Marcus. Marcus, do you want to talk about the water audit that we've got?
Yeah, sure, Jacob. Don't mind at all. So when you get the follow-up from after this session, everyone will see that highlighted link there, which is a link to the water audit document on our website. It's quite comprehensive. It's basically a stepped process document that's got the various questions are prompts to make sure that you look at everything within your organization. Now that document is quite big and it might be too involved for some organizations, but the thing to do is to work through it and fill in what you know. And if you've been allocated as a champion and there's pieces of that audit that you can't fill in, well, ask within the organization. You've been made yourself the champion to see this through. Go to facilities management, go to procurement, and see how much of that water audit document you can complete. And you might be surprised at the results at the end of it.
Yeah, and well, I'll speak for both Marcus and myself. If you have any problems or you want any assistance or advice, we are always happy to, provide an element of free advice to help people improve their water performance. Both EcoProd and the Water Retail Company are quite passionate about good water management. So, even if you're not our customer, we're happy to point you in the right direction. Obviously, if you want to be our customer at some point, that's great too. But it's all about building a better knowledge of water across the whole country. So every single business that does this means that the country manages its water better, and it's good for all of us.
Yeah, we can't carry on doing what we've always done, can we, Jacob? We just it's just not gonna. Well, we've got problems. We've got problems in quite a number of areas of the country, even right now.
No, we haven't touched on this, but there in so
Marcus, have we lost Jacob again?
No, I'm here again. Sorry.
Okay.
As I was saying, do a schematic of how water flows through your business. So a simple model with arrows on showing how water is used. And then you can review the costs and benefits associated with that to devise a plan. And as Marcus has given a few illustrations already, it will give you an idea of where a small spend or even low cost or no cost measures can bring money back to the business. And given the situation most businesses are in at the moment, water is an area that hasn't really been looked at. And we're talking of savings that can run into the thousands or tens of thousands that are quite easy to do. So it's definitely worth doing. Marcus, do you want to touch on that in terms of how water management strategies and the sort of actions that come out of them are nowhere near as expensive as people often think?
No, I fully agree. And I think both to yourself and myself over recent, maybe even just the past year, when we've been engaged with, some pretty big venues, some large operators, that they've never done this stuff. So how on earth can they operate as a knowing that their cost lines, their cost centres are in keeping with the use of the building. Well, they can't, because they've never done this. So yes, I mean, obviously my expertise is in the commercial washroom environment, and we do know that for relatively appropriate levels of capex, you can actually upgrade those areas, bringing outlets down to things like 1.9 litres per minute, showers on time controls, products that can't be left on, so automated shut off, and so on and so forth. And once you've gone through that process, I think we're finding is that some of our clients have been pleasantly surprised at the investment level required to produce not only the water saving, but the benefits and the ambience within those washrooms. And quite simply, a lot of them, as just said, they actually all look much better anyway. So this process helps you to bring your facility up to the expectations of 2021.
It's not just about cost, it's also about amenity, and increasingly now about health, about public health and safety issues as well. I completely agree. But if you're looking to refurbish for health reasons, then you can save money. I mean, it's like replacing the light bulbs in your home. Most water kit these days is a lot more efficient than the stuff was 10 years ago. And the stuff that EcoProd is even more efficient. And quite often it's linked into building management systems. You know, there are digital water systems. You can control your water a lot better. So there are definitely benefits. And in terms of not even buying stuff, just really basic benefits, I would urge everybody to look at your water bill and just check the figures, because you can immediately save money on that. And if you want to, look at the idea of possibly switching a retailer. If you haven't switched retailer, then you're basically on the equivalent of the standard mortgage rate. You're paying the highest amount that the regulator permits. So I'm not saying you should switch to us, but you should certainly, there's a site called Open Water. It's a government site that lists all the different retailers. Just take a look and shop around. It's very easy to switch and you will save money immediately. And then the next bit is, yes, ask for help. There are lots of people with expertise on water management plans, you know, us and EcoProd included, obviously. But hopefully you won't need it. I think if you do the basic water balance yourself, if you start looking at your bills and all that sort of stuff, do that bit first and then go to the experts for more detailed help. But you should be able to start on your own. Don't immediately say, oh yeah, someone else can do this, because you need to own water within your business. And then the 3 elements for a water strategy, once you've got it implemented, it's no point in having it just sitting on a shelf. Monitor it, so monitor the use. And again, this is where Marcus is an expert on a lot of these water using products that can now provide digital outputs and things like this that certainly will enable you to monitor your water use. And there are quite sophisticated devices that can even estimate the way they learn basically the way your business uses water, and then they can spot anomalies, they can spot leaks, they can detect how much water you're using, they can flag up if water use is too high compared to the previous month. These sorts of things are available now. And the next bit is maintain. So maintain your water systems, but also maintain your water management strategy. So this has been a fairly basic outline just to encourage you to do a water management strategy. As Marcus said, there's a lot more detail in the water audit document, and both Marcus and I can talk about this for hours. So we would be delighted to take these questions, but also if you want to drop us an email afterwards with more detailed questions or specific questions to your business, we'd be happy to look at them too. And
okay, thank you very much. So I have got a few questions that have come in. Just a reminder that you can use the chat function and the Q&A function on the Zoom control panel if there's anyone else that wants to submit a question. So, right. You mentioned that the champion could be anyone. Would your advice be to get somebody at board level to get the support?
Having a board champion is obviously a good thing because they quite often hold the purse strings. Having water discussed at board level, I think, is essential. So at least get it once on the board agenda. But in terms of a champion, it's got to be someone who's passionate about this and who is recognized and respected within the business and knows what they're talking about. And that could be someone from facilities management, or it could be someone on the production side. It could be anyone really. But yes, having board buy-in and engagement is important, but the champion doesn't have to be a board manager, have to sit on the board.
Okay, all right, thank you. The water audit, where you pull all the data together, how long does it normally take somebody to pull that sort of report together?
That's a good question. It takes as long as you let it take. Sorry to be blunt to the audience, but that if you're going to take hold of the water audit document, it's going to need to be somebody that's prepared to put in the legwork. What we've found is that when we've left the water audit document to our clients to collate the information, there's some that do it almost immediately, send you through copies of bills, so on and so forth, send you pictures of installations, send you site plans, geological survey maps, and there's others that spend weeks putting this information together. So the champion needs to be somebody that's prepared to put in the legwork to make sure that the components of that water audit document come together effectively and efficiently.
Okay, as a follow-up to that about the water audit, is where would somebody get the data from?
Okay, I think one of the first things about a water audit is you can't do it wrong. So even if it's minimal data, that's better than you've got now. Where do you get the information from? It will be in different departments across your business, as Marcus says. So there's a lot of shoe leather in terms of tracking it down, or you can start to ask external organizations. I would suggest that if you want to know about the first place to look is your water bills, and then you can certainly ask your water suppliers. So your water retailer, your water wholesaler, you can ask them questions about where your water's coming from, where's it going to, why does it cost this much?
Yeah, and things like even just getting a site plan and seeing if it's got the foundational structure of the water supply into the premises on it. If it has, if it's says there's a meter pit, we'll go and look at the meter pit, take some pictures. Yep. All this sort of stuff is just so beneficial.
Yeah, even how many toilets are there in your business? That sort of,
yeah.
Just how many taps. It's quite often that people don't even know those things. And what are they?
Okay. Okay.
The what they're used for thing is important, because sometimes you find that there are taps that are used for things like eye washing or for health reasons. So if you're suddenly going to be putting in low flow water efficient taps, you need to make sure that you're not putting those on decontamination taps or anything like that as well. So you'll need to know not only where they are, but what they're for.
And also another classic is if that champion is really passionate, something like nighttime flow, Jacob, which often gets overlooked. So if your premises are on occupancy control, and you suddenly find from one day to the next that there's a meter reading that's increased, that means you've got some nighttime flow. So there's some connected components that aren't part of the infrastructure, or there's a fault. Even a simple thing like that over 24 hours can flag what potentially might be quite a costly item per annum.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've heard people use the term achieving a water balance. What does that mean?
So you know how much is going in. Yep. You know how much you're using, and you know how much is going out. And you want to be able to balance those elements, a bit like balancing your finances. So imagine it's imagine it's finances, and you've got money in, you've got cost of goods, all those sorts of things. You've got to try and get that to balance. And what that sometimes does is it says, well, hang on a minute, we're using an extra cubic meter a day. And then, as Marcus says, you'll open a service cupboard somewhere and there's a tap running into a drain. That's the sort of thing that's talking about. So
Yeah.
do your water bills match how much you're actually using?
Yeah. Okay.
Another classic is water softeners discharging to drain constantly because they've got a fault. You'd never know because it's not causing any damage. It's going to drain. It's not visible.
It's absolutely right. I mean, and there are now pieces of kit that can do this for you, that can monitor your use and flag up anomalies. But you could also look at comparators for similar businesses. Are you using 3 times as much as a business in the same sector, that's the same size? But you won't know any of this until you start to look at the data, or you start to actually just think about what you're using water for.
Okay, thank you. In our business, water is not a significant cost for us.
Mhm.
Why should this be a priority?
Okay, this is a great question. So let's say you're an insurance broker or something, and water is a few £100s a year. What would you do if the water got shut off? So the toilets wouldn't flush, people couldn't wash their hands. You'd have to close the business. So do you have a contingency plan for what happens if there isn't any water? That's the key thing. So water
Okay.
doesn't cost very much, but it costs your business a fortune when you don't have any.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Related. How does saving water translate to saving carbon? I think that was something you mentioned on one of the early slides.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll split this one with Marcus, but from a water supply viewpoint, water is extremely heavy, and I say very difficult to heat. So water is abstracted from rivers and underground. It's then treated. Both of those things involve carbon. It's then pumped to your business. Sewerage is then discharged and again has to be pumped and again has to be treated. So there's a big carbon element associated with that. So for instance, in Scotland, Scottish Water is the largest electricity consumer in Scotland. There's a huge amount of energy associated with water, and that's just outside the business. That's the sort of tap water and sewerage element. I mean, Marcus, do you want to talk about heating water and water within?
Yeah, okay.
Systems as well.
Yeah, well, I can give you, if I can give quite a straightforward and simple case study. So we installed one of our low flow taps nationwide for a operator. We put water meters in on the hot and the cold services to one of their sites, and these are really high footfall locations. And we monitored that for 3 months. We then put our products in to that site and monitored it for another 3 months. Not only was there the water saving for the cold water, which was very significant because we were only on 1.9 litres per minute flow rate, whereas the taps previously were in excess of 10 litres. But we then did a cap, and that particular site was actually on LPG for heating its for the energy supply for heating the hot water plant. So we then calculated the non-use of hot water, and we were cutting their energy bill for that site by 12% just by installing some taps. So there you go. That's the energy level reduction, and from that energy you can equate that back into CO2e reduction as well. And that's a very straightforward case study.
Okay.
On a national level, CO2 emissions associated with water are about the same as those for aviation pre-COVID.
Okay. Right, I've got one more, I think, unless any more pop through while we're talking. And that is, I've just had a look at the audit form on your website. Is this the sort of thing that somebody could help me with?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the first thing is, though, don't be daunted by it, because even if you only fill in small bits of it, that's better than not doing any of it. We admit it is quite long and it's fairly comprehensive, but even just doing small bits of it is great. But in terms of helping, yeah, we would be delighted to help, as I'm sure Marcus would be. But there are basic things you've got to get first. So you've got to get your bills together. You've got to think about your water use. You've ideally got to get some plans of the site. That makes it a lot easier once you've got those pulled together.
Cool. Okay.
And if you can't find those, then again, yeah, ask us and we'll tell you where to find them.
Okay. That's brilliant. Okay, I don't think I've got any more that have come through while we were talking. No, I haven't. Okay, in that case, I'm going to say thank you very much to everybody who attended this afternoon. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've got a recording of the session and we'll get the slides out to you. It'll probably be tomorrow morning now by the time the recording processes. That'll come via email, so you'll have all of these materials at your disposal, and our contact details, of course, if you would like to follow up and get in touch. Thank you very much, Marcus and Jacob, for your presentation today. And hopefully we will see some of you on a presentation again sometime soon. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody.